Welcome everybody. Nation Chipper on day 2 of the convention's always a bit of a rougher day, but hopefully I can keep you well enthused and excited. My name is Grant Shepert. I'm doing a talk on Formbuilder, where it's at, where it's headed, specifically via SurveyBuilder. And SurveyBuilder is basically a new plugin that we've built for a client for Mura, and it has a lot of features in it that we are going to hopefully be migrating into Mura. And there's probably going to be lots of qualifications so that I don't make any big promises that I can't keep because I'm not responsible for them. So if you see the bunny quotes, that's why. So forms, yuck, am I right? They're complex for users to create. They're a pain to create. They're hard to maintain, and submitted data is a pain to parse, package, and reuse. So I absolutely hate forms. So Mura Forms 1.0 was basically an integration. It was a plugin for CK Editor. They were manually created. You basically just dropped the components, and what you were doing is dropping HTML blocks into it. Sort of self-assembled these divs, and it was chunky, it was finicky, it was structurally very fragile. You couldn't do any sort of bootstrap things with it, and the data saved was just a big XML object blob. So as far as just having to create them from scratch, it was a huge improvement, but again, there was still a lot of yards to cover on the field. So Mura Forms 2 was Formbuilder, and when I started with Blue River about 5.5 years ago already, I still think to this day that the reason I got the job is because I had this Formbuilder plugin that I was building and Matt really wanted it. So I made us a package deal, and now Formbuilder is inside of Mura, and it added a lot of functional usefulness, drag and drop form building. It was, I would like to think, much more user-friendly than the previous one. It was modular, so we could update it fairly easily on the back end. And it just made forms easier to manage. So Formbuilder 2, a la Mura 7, and well, yeah, we'll get to that in a bit, added a few new features as well. So display objects changed completely, obviously, as you've seen throughout MuraCon. So I had a chance to go in and rebuild Formbuilder because I had to rebuild the whole front end. So the one big thing that was a much bigger win than I expected when I announced this last year was multi-page forms. Apparently that's something everybody really wanted, and I had no idea that it was that important, but yeah, it earned a big round of applause in the middle of my talk. I should have left right at that point. Yeah, so that was a big thing that it added. We switched the Formbuilder rendering from custom to using handlebars to render the actual Formbuilder itself. It went from about, I think, 1,800 lines of JavaScript code down to about 400 lines of JavaScript code, and that's just because all of those back-end templates were literally hand-built, and handlebars really came up, and really wish that would have been available 5 years ago too. And now it's rendered via Mura.js. So all forms now, when you drag them onto your front end, are actually rendered via JavaScript, and that offered a lot of flexibility and power as well. And like I said, I rewrote the backend administrator from scratch, so it is much leaner and more flexible for future growth. And I considered it, essentially, it was a foundation base for future improvement. So it basically brought Formbuilder up to a point where we could now use some of the more modern tools like Ember and handlebars to improve it iteratively as the new versions of Mura came out. And most importantly, it was to begin using it for other applications inside of Mura too. So it was an improvement, but there still was much more room for improvement because it really just was like rebuilding the foundation. So it was still very sort of static and rigidly rendered. Data is still saved as XML. Front end rendering is also pretty rigid. So that meant it wasn't easy to extend. But the vision really for creating this new version of Formbuilder was that I wanted to build, or I needed to build, SurveyBuilder. So SurveyBuilder is what it sounds like, a survey building plugin. Now let's just take a quick look at SurveyBuilder. So nice to see that coming up. Yeah, so surveys, a pretty popular thing to have on your website. We had a client that wanted to, when they were migrating over from another CMS, didn't want to lose their ability to do surveys. Most of the plugins that were out were fairly old in Cold Fusion, so leveraged Survey or Formbuilder to do surveys. So to give you an example, a quick example of a survey, and if you've used Formbuilder before, it'll look very familiar, right? So essentially what we've got, again, just like the previous version of Formbuilder, is we have our different form field types across the top. Now, if you haven't noticed, we've got the different pages, and you can drag and drop now questions to the two different pages. Oops. There we go. Right? Reorder, drag and drop. When you click on each one, you get your templates for adding your information in. So even though it looks very similar, this version is a complete rewrite of the previous version. So there have been a lot of improvements, and it functions a lot smoother. There's also some other new features that we're going to look at that we've built into this that hopefully we'll be making it into the new Formbuilder. So it's basically it's a high functioning survey application for Mura CMS. Proper data structure for surveys, and this was the big requirement. You can't do surveys and just have each survey result stored in an XML blob and then somehow turn that into graphs and charts and prettiness and have available data. So that was the big difference, is SurveyBuilder's results are actually, every survey creates one or more Mura ORM objects, and all the data from the forms is saved into Mura ORM. So that allows for custom and complex question types, like matrices. So if you know what a matrix is, it's basically just like a block of radio button sort of questions, and we'll take a look at a few of those. And visualization of results, so that you can get an overall view of, like pie charts for drop downs and bar charts, things like that. And then individual views for each survey result, because of course you can have just simple straight questions. And then a much wider range of downloadable results. So this is now the dream, that I built Formbuilder 2.0 with the vision of building SurveyBuilder. Now that we've got SurveyBuilder, I want to start migrating a lot of that functionality into Formbuilder. So the plan to migrate is most, all functionality. We are going to be road mapping a lot of this and prioritizing based on what we really want the next version of Mura to be. So I would expect eventually almost all of this functionality would be in Formbuilder, but again, I have to be responsible in what I promise. So we're going to just call this Formbuilder Future Edition. There are no version numbers here, nothing to attach to a specific build of Mura. So one of the things that I added in SurveyBuilder was configurator options. So if we take a look again at our website, so here I've got a simple survey asking a name and choose one, A, B, or C. Now it's all run or added onto the page via the new display objects. So if I go and edit this, I've got my sidebar configurator, and every single survey obviously gets its own. So I can select my survey. Oops, maybe I'll click right here. Right, so I've got 3 different surveys here that I can choose from. So got test survey 1. I've got a start date and an end date, so that every single time I add a survey to a page, it can have its own individual start date and stop date. And I also have versioning, so that every single survey I add to the page, I can say this is a specific version. So for instance, if you had a survey, you were teaching a course, and you had multiple courses across the year, you could add the same survey to each course, and you could just say this is the version for you know, the cooking class, and this is the one for creative writing, and this is the one for whatever. So you could get the overall view of all of the responses for your courses, and then you could say, well, just give me the version for the cooking class, and let's see how that one compares. And to add a new one, you basically just can click on Create New Version, type in the name, so you have basically an unlimited number of versions, and you can keep reusing that version across multiple instances. So you could have, if you have 12 cooking courses, and you want to just use that, you just want to block all of those into the cooking version, you just can pick that from the drop-down. So there's a lot of, it's a very simple sort of feature, but adds a lot of power when it comes to analyzing the data. So configurator options. So there's response versioning. Every form can be versioned so that all responses can be viewed individually or separately. Start and stop dates. Really nice sort of sub-features for that don't exist now in forms. A form is a form right now in Mura. So it would be nice to get this in for the next or a future edition of Formbuilder. Another big win was conditional fields. Forms right now don't have any logic built into them. If you want to build logic in, you essentially have to inject that yourself manually. So conditional fields lets us add a bit of logic, for instance, other or hide and show. Oops. Where are we going here? All right, so let's just take a quick look at what that means. So I'm going to go into SurveyBuilder here, go back up to surveys, and I've got one called conditional fields. All right, so I've got a drop down for ice cream. So I'm just asking, what is your favorite ice cream? I've got chocolate, vanilla, Rocky Road, and then I just gave up. I'm not going to list every single type of ice cream, so I just put in other. Now the thing with Formbuilder right now is other, you would just have to have an other box sitting there, not quite as pretty. But in this case, my other box is conditional. So what the conditional will do is any previous question that you've got that allows for choice. So if it's a drop down or a radio box or even a check box, it'll appear in all of the subsequent fields. So in this case, I've got one called ice cream, and then I can say show this or hide this depending on what choice was made in that previous drop down. In this case, I pick other. So when I go to the front end and I go to conditional, I can see I don't have other. I got chocolate, I can pick vanilla, but then as soon as I pick other, the other box pops up, and there's a lot of sort of logic that you can use to make your forms a lot more user-friendly. That's pretty cool, eh? Yeah. 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 Thanks. Yeah. So that adds a lot of power, but a lot of times the subsequent questions are dependent on what the answer was to that previous question. So for instance, if you wanted to have a nicer setup for people entering addresses, you could say, okay, pick your country. So you pick United States. And then really the only choice we have right now in Formbuilder is to have just blank fields, right? So type in your state, type in your city. With remote conditional fields, now we can actually act on what they've picked in that previous question and remotely go out to an endpoint and get some extra data. So it can call out to a custom CFC It can call out to just a page of static JSON if you just want to have literally just type in static JSON, or the JSON API. So if you wanted a list of users automatically available in your form, you could just refer to the users endpoint, and you can put conditions in that string too. So you can say all the users in a certain group and just give me the top 20 or things like that. So you can type that in. The way we do that, go back to SurveyBuilder, and we look at remote conditions. So I've got a simple example here. So we've got a drop down. What country are you in? United States or Canada? So now city, I have no idea how to populate this, and I'm certainly not going to put all of the cities that they could possibly choose in here, especially because I would have to enter them all for both choices. So I go over to conditional, and so there's the hide, there's the show, but then there's now also reload. And what reload does is it says, go to this remote source, and what I've done is I've just created a city.cfc in a folder, a local folder, that looks like this. It's pretty simple. Right, so I've just created a folder inside of Mura called remote test and dropped the CFC in there called city. And if I just called it directly, I put the call that will trigger it right at the top there. But essentially what it does is it looks at the value, arguments that value that gets sent in. So what SurveyBuilder will do is as soon as you change drop down or one of those choices that's attached to a condition, is it will take all the information from that field and the field that you're filling and pass it to this CFC, and then you can act on that. So in this case, if the argument is US, I give it these 3 cities. If the value is CA, I give it these 3. And I've also got another function in here for states that works on the same pattern. So city has a conditional for country, tells it to reload. State also has a conditional. United States shouldn't be shown in there. That's a little bit of a bug that I got to fix. Shauna, did you make a note of that? Okay, thanks. I know you did. I'm surprised you're not typing already. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so again, it's going to that same CFC. All I've done is put in the URL what method to call. If I was calling the JSON API, again, I could put in whatever query string I wanted inside that string, and Bob's your uncle. So let's just see it in action. So I go to remote loading. Right now it's United States, and it has pre-populated those 2 drop-downs. If I go to Canada, it switches to Edmonton and Alberta. So now you can have really highly functional forms really easily inside of Mura. Also pretty cool, eh? Yeah, I like that one myself. All right. Coming through. All right, what else do we have? We have form templates. And I actually realized that I haven't put this build up on my local copy of SurveyBuilder here. Essentially what it is if we go back to surveys, we've got 3 different surveys here. And I can actually duplicate surveys. So I'm skipping a little ahead. But if I click on duplicate, I now have an exact copy of that survey, and I can just start working on it again, which is in itself a pretty highly requested feature. But what I've also added is there's another tab at the top called templates. And a template is essentially whenever we create one of these surveys, the description of the survey, in other words, everything that you would see here, so each field, all the drop-down data, all that is actually stored in a JSON object. So we don't like break it all out and create a big complex sort of model for it. We just pack it all into a nice single JSON object that's actually very portable and easy to replicate. So duplicate was a pretty easy feature, but templates What it also does is it creates the CFCs on the fly. So for instance, this survey I've got here has 2 pages. There's page 1. Page 2 has a big matrix. So what is your favorite Star Trek movie? Right? So we've got a lot of questions here that are possible results. So templates essentially instead of creating the actual CFCs, templates just take that JSON object and saves it in the database as a non-usable sort of survey, just like a starter survey. And then you can just go into those. So you can create contact forms and simple surveys, that sort of thing, and then lock it down so that users, regular administrators, can't create new surveys, but they can use any of those existing templates. And they can drag those over and then put them up themselves. So it's a nice sort of convenience feature. So form templates, so create, export, and import as well, too. So you can move your surveys in between different Mura sites. And front-end rendering is templated now, too. Everything is rendered via Mura.js now. And there inside of Mura.js is a Mura.templates. And it contains all the rendered handlebar display templates. So when we look at the front end, so all of them can be overridden and customized. So if we take a look at the front end survey, this is where we get, often people will say, well, we want to do like side-by-sides, or we want to do, there's all sorts of, or we use Foundation instead of Bootstrap. Or they just have some very specific, especially in some of the bigger organizations or government, they have some very specific formats that they want to put into their forms. So inside of every Mura.js direct, or inside of every Mura site in the JavaScript directory, you'll see the distribution directory that contains Mura.js. But all of that is compiled out of the source directory. So you can see all of the sort of, we've got Mura.displayObject.form, which is the thing that actually renders Mura forms. And we've got a directory in there called templates. And all of these templates are the raw handlebar templates that render the front end. And they're all compiled. There's a compiled.js in that folder too. So you can say this.mura.templates.dropdown. So whenever a dropdown renders on the front end of Mura, it uses this handlebars template to render it. So you can override any of those templates, and you can do it on a per form basis as well. You just have to include those templates in the header using Mura.loader or a listener in your own custom display object. Override those on a case-by-case basis or globally, and you can now render your forms however you like. So that was a really nice sort of addition to Mura 7 display objects as well that I put in there. What else do we have? Well, this was the big one. This was the big win. Mura ORM integration. There was no way we were going to be able to do surveys without having those surveys create proper data. So proper data structures for all forms. When we move this into Formbuilder, it's going to be a choice. Because, of course, if you create dozens and dozens of forms, you don't essentially want, you don't want to be forced to necessarily create dozens and dozens of new Mura ORM objects. So you'll be able to enable it on a case-by-case basis. But what it does is now all of your form results are immediately available via Mura.js, the JSON API. It's linked immediately into the content objects. So if you drop a form onto a page, all of those results are linked via the content ID. All those results are linked via the content ID to the page, and also the user ID. So you can mark a form as anonymous, and it won't say the user ID. Or if you just leave it as recording it, you now don't have to capture any of that user information. You can just look at their user ID if they're logged in. So users and content are tied to all of those responses. So if I go to surveys, well, actually that's the one I wanted to use, test survey 1. So right now I've got a name field, which is just a regular text entry field. Every form now has a label and a question. So the label is sort of the short little marker that you can use internally so that you can have very long questions that you ask on the front end. You don't want to see those in the results because that's just going to mess things up. And it also is the tool that names the actual column in your database. So it's pretty key and pretty important. We have some logic in there to make sure that you're not constantly creating the same field over and over. So if you had like 7 different name fields, you wouldn't just have one column in your database called name and blow up Mura. But that's how that functions. You can put in a default value. There's some advanced features. You can make it a hidden field. And where that's really useful is if you had a question or a form field in your form and you want to deprecate it, you don't want to ask that anymore, but you want to not lose the data, you can just mark it as hidden. It won't render on the front end anymore, but it'll still show up in your results. You can put in a CSS class, and then of course there's your conditionals. Now you'll see there's no choices in there because, like I said, every question is dependent upon whatever came previous. So if I drag this down, I think, yeah, and I go to conditional, now the choose one shows up in there. So it's pretty smart about making sure that you're not attaching logic to questions that they haven't answered yet. So then I have choose one, which is just a simple drop down. I've got choices A, B, C, and D. And then on page 2, we have that big matrix. And if I wanted, so this is the favorite Star Trek. What is your favorite Star Trek movie? Another thing that I've added here too is the duplicate. Because I don't want to, if I want to ask the question again based on these, I'm not typing all this again. That took a long time. So I can click on duplicate. Boom. There it is again. I can say, whoops. Come on. I'm having a scroll failure here. Continuing. So I can say, what was the worst Star Trek movie? So what is the worst Star Trek movie? And that's all I have to change. You can see it automatically updates the name of the column. I've got all my questions. And I'm actually going to put that on another page. So I'm going to click on the plus, go back to page 2, and just drag that down to page 3. And I am going to save that. Good. I don't know why I always get nervous, but they always seem to do fun things during presentations. So here's my survey. I can put in a name. I'll put in Sean. I'll choose B. Because why not B? Click next, and what are your favorite? Don't judge me. I'm just going to pick some randomly. Best Star Trek movie, Galaxy Quest. Then I'll say Wrath of Khan, and then I don't really have a third one, so I'll just pick. We'll say Search for Spock. Let's be really evil. Click next. What is the worst Star Trek movie? Well, that would be The Search for Spock. And then just so many choices for the worst Star Trek movie. How can I possibly? Undiscovered Country. How could I not pick that one first? So let's just, never mind, I'm having a personal moment here. And then I hit submit. Survey complete. So now let's go look at the results. So there's a couple of options here, and again, there's a lot of this that I would like to move into Formbuilder as well. And just to add some more visualization to just regular form results as well. So if I go to test survey 1, what? Oh, maybe because that's a new object, it might not have reloaded that. So let's just try this again. Come on. No, this is what I was talking about. Come on. Okay, let's just look at the individual results for now. So I added a bunch of these. earlier. So here's Sean's response. You can see it's automatically, because I was logged in as user admin, it's attached my name, my account, and you can actually click through to that. The name, what I chose, there's my favorite Star Trek movies and worst Star Trek movies. Now, it's ordered by the order that the questions are entered in, because of course these are pretty subjective answers. The application's not going to know that the word first, it should be ahead of the word second. You can have essentially any answer in there. However, you can actually add values, numeric values to those answers, and then it will order, if it can order them by numerically, it will. But ordering it alphabetically, again, doesn't really help, because first is not necessarily going to be alphabetically the first one you want at the top. So you can page through all your results now individually, and you can see worst Star Trek is empty for most of these previous answers that I entered, because of course that one didn't exist. And I can also now download all these results individually. And not just before, we could just download them as a sort of chunked up Excel spreadsheet, but now we have a lot more options. We can download as a CVS, an Excel, PDF, or HTML. So let's just do the HTML version. And there's all my results for my survey, all nicely laid out. So a lot more options that we could. Oh, was it? Right. Oh, sorry. Oh, I see. So yeah, it's that scroll issue that killed me yesterday. So we're just going to keep it on this. So yeah, so this is the HTML version. The PDF version looks essentially the same. The CVS is all broken up. And what it does is it has to interact. Like I said, when you create that Formbuilder form, it saves all the information in a JSON object. And then the results all are stored using IDs. So you really have to, when it comes to the view part of this, merge those two bits of information. Because a lot of the core answers, like first, second, third, are still in that JSON object. So there's a little bit of heavy lifting in the back end that we do, but there are some functions available that make that a lot easier, that automate a lot of that. How are we doing for time here? Not too bad. So Mura ORM integration, proper data structures for all the forms, immediately available to Mura.js. User content is tied to the responses. And if you came to my talk yesterday, if you saw my talk yesterday, I had the data tables example. Well, this is the data table hooked up just generically to that test survey that we just did. So chosen A, B, C, or D, and all filtered. I literally changed nothing in here. This CFC, I could go delete it, resave the form. It's going to create that MuraORM object for me, and immediately it's part of MuraORM. Immediately you can look at it through the JSON API. Nothing else that you have to do. So as far as the usability of the data that these forms create now, it's off the chart. And what it actually does, and I'll give you a quick peek on the back end here, is inside of all Mura site IDs now, not necessarily there by default, but if you create a model directory inside of Mura and drop beans in there, if they are formatted for MuraORM, in other words, let's see, let's take a look at this one. So in this case, it extends Mura survey entity bean, which actually extends MuraORM bean. So if you've got this model directory and it introspects into these and discovers there are MuraORM beans, Mura will automatically wire them up. So all I do in SurveyBuilder, and if we take a look at our test survey 1, is it's just gone in and created this bean for me. So the matrix one is a little more complex because it's essentially a bunch of questions packaged into one. So it'll create columns for each one of those. There's the choose one drop down. There's the name. And it extends Mura or the Mura survey entity bean, which contains the links to user ID and content ID. So it automates essentially everything. Now you can see it says not update safe, edit extending bean in models beans. So these are essentially created by SurveyBuilder, and then it creates also a stub in the beans directory. So now if you want to add some customization actions, so every time a survey is created, you want to send out an email alert, or you want to massage the data somehow, or you want to convert it, or do anything you want with it, these are all update safe. You can go in, add all the functions you want, all the event listeners you want, and really leverage the power of every single form. So there's a lot of power and flexibility in there as well. And like I said, they are, in case I didn't say it, they are update safe. So data, data, data. This is what I wanted out of Formbuilder when I first put it in. So yay, data. So now we can have some the friendlier insights, the wider range of download options. There's just a lot more things we can do with forms now with SurveyBuilder, and like I said, soon into Mura. So I'm going to pre-answer some questions. Just call me crazy, but I have a feeling I know what some of these questions are going to be. Pre-answer for question 1. Will I be able to build applications with Formbuilder? Well, if you can create a complex form and it creates a MuraORM object, that sounds like the start of a wonderful way to start putting together really complex applications. So the answer is a qualified no. Formbuilder is an application. So it does make a few compromises in the way it saves data. For instance, if you have checkboxes, checkboxes are all one-to-many or many-to-one. So if you have 14 checkbox fields and 20 choices in each one of these options, you're going to have a table with, well, what did I say, 20 plus 20 times 20, suddenly now you've got 400 columns in your table. That's not very functional. So instead, what I've got is a field option bean that stores all the multi-answer responses globally. So anytime you've got one-to-manys, for all of your forms, all of those answers are going to be stored in this one CSC. So for Formbuilder, it could care less because it's just a bean. It knows how to connect to it and knows how to pull out those answers. But for an application, that's not exactly how you would want to create it. So while it gives you a lot of power to work with the data, and it probably would get you that 80% of the way to your application really quickly, that last 20% is going to make you absolutely miserable. So I would say that it might be a really good template or example for building your application, but I wouldn't use it as the basis of your application. So I'm going to pre-answer question number 2. Will I be able to customize Formbuilder? And that's a qualified yes. So SurveyBuilder is a customization of Formbuilder Future. Almost all of the things I showed you in SurveyBuilder are actually already core Mura. The engine that creates the CFCs, that's already in Mura. All the front-end templating rendering for the surveys, that's actually all just regular Mura Formbuilder rendering. But what's cool is SurveyBuilder taps into Mura.js and extends templates for matrix, so it just injects those templates in there. And that means that you can do the same thing. So if you have custom fields that you want to insert into your surveys, you can access all the same things that I did inside of SurveyBuilder. And like I said, you can override all those front-end rendering templates. So again, there's a lot of customization options there.
Where would you do that in the file structure so easily so it doesn't get?
Well, because it's just Mura.js now, it's just JavaScript. All you have to do is load the JavaScript that overrides what Mura would have already preloaded. So if you've got Mura.templates.js, if you load a version later than that, right, because that's going to be in the head, and you've got templates that are named the same but contain different variables, you're basically just replacing the existing variables in Mura.templates with your own templates. So by its very nature, it's update safe. Yeah. And rendering on the front end extends Mura.displayObject.form. So even SurveyBuilder is just a modification of Formbuilder. So you can take that as an example and override Form or SurveyBuilder and do your own thing as well. So it absolutely is possible to customize Formbuilder. And the final question, hey, what about this SurveyBuilder thing? You know, where do I get my hands on SurveyBuilder? Well, we haven't answered that question yet. We built SurveyBuilder for a client, and with the idea that we would be moving some of this functionality that we really wanted to be core into the Mura core. But we haven't really answered the question is what does SurveyBuilder become? Is it going to be an integration of Mura? Like, are we just going to make SurveyBuilder an actual part of Mura? Is it going to be an add-on? What's the license going to be? We haven't decided that yet, but we will be deciding it fairly soon. Fairly soon. What's that? Sorry? You're, oh, yeah. Actually, that's a very good question. How many people would find a use for a SurveyBuilder inside of Mura? So hardly any of you. For the people at the front, everybody essentially raised their hands. So big surprise, Malcolm, hey? Yeah. Yeah, no, surveys, I love surveys. They're very, very useful. So now that I've pre-answered what I would assume were the sort of big questions, I'll open the floor to some actual questions. So anybody have any? Yeah, in the back?
Yeah, from a user standpoint, not the editor.
Right.
Who's got a survey? Any thought about creating a drag and drop where you can put photo galleries in and then drag and drop areas?
Well, yeah, that would essentially be just like another custom question that you would add on the end, where you would basically ask them. You would create a question template in Formbuilder saying, you know, answer with an image or upload an image. Files aren't part of SurveyBuilder, but they are certainly part of forms. So there probably will be some logical extensions we have to make to that. But you could add that functionality. I don't think we've got it in there now, but as an extension, adding it yourself would be possible, or as a future customization, certainly.
Yeah. I know where that question, we do a lot of like photo contests, and contests that are, and I use the old CK editor version
Right.
rather than drag and drop, because you can throw a picture, say, do you like A or B better, or this or that?
Right.
And it renders together rather than separately as two different objects.
So in the Formbuilder, you would have the ability when you're adding your responses to attach an image. That would be that would be. You can't do that now. I've never actually been asked that question, but it is. Yeah, it would be very possible.
We just code that by hand.
Yeah. Essentially, all you would have is the files uploading and then attaching the Mura file IDs in those answers. So, yeah, it's not something that it certainly isn't something that we do now, but I think you can log that as a.
Are you going to leave the CK editor form function as it is?
Yes. Yeah, that definitely won't change. And Formbuilder, whatever the future version is, all of this will be essentially optional. Like I said, that doesn't have to be Mura RM, so it'll be completely backwards compatible with any forms that you already have inside of Mura. Yeah?
I might have missed this, but is Mura Cache baked into this still the way it was in 6.2 where you drop in, a couple values?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. CAPTCHA is integrated into it. And also, we never actually did look at the response charts, but all the charting in the back end is Google Charts as well, too. So, yeah. Any other questions?
It would be helpful for anyone else. Have you ever considered having answers to the questions and like correct answers instead of a survey, more like a test or questionnaire or something like that?
Yeah, see, and that is another use case that we've talked about where, surveys are you're asking the questions and tests are you're giving the answers and they have to pick the correct one. And I think...
Or you can respond, like you pick one and say, no, you actually meant what it was.
Right, yeah.
Of course, rather
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that it's a different enough use case that we would probably build it as a separate, then there would be like test builder rather than survey builder, because trying to do the 2-in-1 might just add, well, it would add a lot of sort of not conflicting, but sort of different methodologies. But it's certainly, while I was building SurveyBuilder, was in the back of my head that, oh yeah, test builder's got to be in there. It's got to be in the queue there somewhere.
Functionally, you could extend SurveyBuilder and modify it yourself and build a test builder fairly easily.
Yes, yeah, like the model, all of the heavy lifting now is certainly there. So it's just mostly it's just a different way of presenting the survey you've built and how you would process the results. Because of course, then you have to mark them, right? So you have to indicate which was the correct choice, not just what choice did they make. Yeah. But all of the logic, all of the bits and pieces are certainly there to do that. Yeah.
Not to be pedantic about a test builder, but just because we just added test box to the app, if I could suggest we call that one quiz builders.
Yeah.
Test box and test builder. Getting confused between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not my department, so.
It just popped in my head. Oh wait, is that the thing? No, that's not the thing we talked about 20 minutes ago. That's
Yeah.
another thing with the names slightly similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Names are always. It took me 5 days just to decide on what to call where do we put the multi-select answers. What's the name of that stupid bean going to be? Because, yeah, names are always painful. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm going to be around, obviously, for the rest of the conference. I love forms and hate forms and Formbuilder. So if you have any questions on that or SurveyBuilder or want to see a little more, by all means, grab me, pull me aside, and pick whatever nuggets might be left of my brain for some gold. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming.